Hey Miraculous fans, Crystal here, and I have just watched Werepapas, and oh boy was it a ride. It was certainly a ride. There's a lot to unpack. I definitely understand why people were talking so much about it when it first aired, because there are all these different aspects to it that I want to go over. I'll start with, I'll start with what we saw first, which the before credits scene. Again, I noticed we're still going with the new formula of, yes, a cold open, which, if I'm using that right, means a scene before the theme song, and we're also always doing an after the end card scene. And they kind of mirrored each other, which I liked, because the first scene was cute little Adrian talking to his mum. She mentioned her parents. And then I knew about that line. People were sharing the pictures saying, the heartbreaking line where he asks, does that mean dad doesn't love me because he's never around? And she explains that no, it's just because he's always traveling trying to find a cure for this mysterious illness. Well, we know what it is, but obviously they don't want to tell Adrian why she's so sick. Which also shows just how slowly it progressed and how long she was sick for. Because in that scene, he's way younger. He looks like he's, I don't know, 5. But then, later on, the post end card scene, they come home and he asks, "Did you find the medicine?" They didn't. And he looks basically his current age, so it must be that scene must take place, not too long before she died, maybe. I don't know, but that just shows how slowly it progressed, which is interesting because if you compare it to what happened to Nathalie, within the short span of the show, because so far from the beginning of the show to now, it's only been, what, 1 full year, I guess? I don't know. And she first used the Peacock Miraculous, I think at the end of season 2, and that's when she started getting sick from it. And then it progressed and got to the season 5 finale. She basically died. A lot of people debated that as to whether she was fully dead or not. When she talked to Marinette in her bed and all that, but I'm getting off topic a bit here. But my point was comparing what happened to Emily with what happened to Nathalie. I guess the main distinction could be maybe Emily just used it once. She used it once to make Adrian and then never used it again, whereas Nathalie used it multiple times. Mainly throughout season 3, she made a whole bunch of center monsters, and we see it get progressively worse. So that's probably what made her condition get worse so much faster. Or it could also just be that maybe the Peacock Miraculous was even more broken by that point, meaning the effects were more severe. I don't know. Or it could also be, we've had times where it's been said the Miraculous are not meant to be used for evil purposes, like we saw side effects on Shadybug and Claw Noir. So maybe Nathalie got sicker faster because she was using it for evil purposes as Myura, whereas the one time Emily used it wasn't really for anything evil, it was to make a real person, which had good intentions. I talked about that way longer than I intended to, because that was just the first and last scene. There's still the bulk of this episode to go over, which was really, I don't know if emotional is the right word. It's not like it had me crying, but it was really tender at times. That's the word I'll go for. Like the progression with Nathalie, where at the start, I've seen people point this out, Adrian went for a hug and she did not really reciprocate it, but she did hug him back at the end, and I think it's really nice to have all those implications of everything that's going on in her head that she doesn't say, but it's all that stuff of like she feels like, you know, she feels like she can't be close to him because maybe she's not worthy, she's not his real mother, and maybe she thinks he's better off with biological family. I don't know. She doesn't consider herself his real family. Speaking of family, briefly Marinette's family was around at the beginning, but they weren't the focus. But it was interesting that she also had a set of grandparents visiting. But not just that, her family were talking about how, you know, they want to have Adrian over at some point, and she was like, well, you've met him, and her dad was like, yeah, but you gotta introduce him as your boyfriend now, which, is that the first time they've used the word boyfriend or girlfriend? Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm actually, no, it's not. Don't mind me. Illustrator, I think Alia definitely referred to him as her boyfriend, like, oh, are you scared to be alone with your boyfriend? That kind, yeah. I don't know, it's still, maybe, yeah, it's not the first time, but it still feels a bit jarring. Maybe because in season 5, I'm not sure if they used the words boyfriend and girlfriend, because they were in this weird transition phase of, like, they admitted they had feelings, they wanted to be together, but then I don't know if they were completely together at that point. I don't know at what point you'd consider it official. It's tricky, but yeah, Marinette's family was pretty enthusiastic. But I did like how Marinette reacted, like when, you know, she said, are you doing anything Sunday? And he said he can't. And she immediately switched up the tone. She was really supportive, but I liked how he said his grandparents were visiting. She's like, that's amazing. And he's like, no, I'm not sure if it's amazing. And the way she switched up her tone and was really understanding, that was pretty good, the whole emotional shift there. But let's talk about these characters of the episode, which are Adrian's grandparents. It really feels like they're trying to do this whole polar opposite kind of thing. We have the rich family, the really traditional, the husband was even a duke, you know, he wanted to be called Lord, and then the other family, it's interesting to notice they were never even married. They mentioned they're together, but they just never bothered with marriage. But as they said that, I noticed a slight detail. There is a ring on the wife's finger. I don't know about the husband's. I didn't zoom in and check. I just happened to notice when I was looking at the wife. There is a ring, and it is on the fourth finger, traditionally the ring finger, but it was on her right hand, which, in case you don't know, traditional normally has a wedding ring on the left hand ring finger. I know not everyone follows that tradition, but that's what it normally is. So they never got married, but she does wear a ring, but they're still breaking tradition a little. Still, the whole polar opposites thing, I think it really worked with this. Not just that, the whole polar opposite of the fact that I remember seeing people posting pictures and saying, these parents raised the Gabriel that we now know. Like, I guess he really changed when he got with Emily. I don't know. Because Gabriel doesn't really act like he was raised by them. But, and not just that, he changed his name, because you'll notice these grandparents, their surname is Grasset, not Agrest, which maybe Gabriel changed his surname to sound richer or something, I don't know. He wanted to fit in better with rich communities. I mean, Adrian never even knew these grandparents either, and it's not because they were, quote, mean, like Emily said her parents were. It's just Gabriel just didn't want to associate with his parents, so Adrian didn't get to meet them. But of course, with these grandparents, it led to a custody fight. And nobody in this room, well, until maybe Marinette at the end, thought to ask what Adrian would want. Granted, it seemed like he doesn't fully know what he wants, at least not until the end, when he agreed and said, yeah, my life is here, I want to live with Nathalie, and I'll see the grandparents on holidays. But it's tricky on the surface, but if this situation had been taken to court, that a court would decide based on what's in the best interest of the kid and what would cause the least disruption in his life. It's like, let's say for instance, two parents live in Seattle and they get divorced and one of them wants to move to New York with a new partner. Gee, who should get the kid? The one who's gonna uproot the kid's life and move away? And yes, that is an example from a TV show. I won't say which show, but if you know it, great. But the point still stands, because, like, a judge would probably not give Adrian to the rich grandparents who would probably take him to London. His life is here. That would mess up his life, so they would not get custody. Well, unless they would because they're rich and I don't know if they can, like, bribe a judge or something. I don't know. But the point still stands. His life should be undisturbed. But the other things they were fighting over, there are two things that the rich couple said that belonged to them. Number one is the house, because they said, you know, it was our house anyway. We gave it to Emily to live in with her husband, and now everyone's acting like it's Gabriel's house. The problem with that is that they weren't specific over whether they legally transferred ownership to Emily or not. Because if they gave the house to Emily officially, then with Emily and Gabriel gone, it's Adrian's. If Emily and Gabriel had no will, then with both of them gone, pretty sure it defaults to their son and not her parents. But the other thing they were fighting over is the rings. And once again, yeah, they were like, well, it's a family thing and we should have it back. But, like, you gave it to Emily. She used it as her wedding rings, and Gabriel wore one during their marriage. And now that they're both gone, again, it goes to their kid, not her parents. So, pretty sure if they were to continue the fight, they would have no legal claim over those rings. Because if they gave them to Emily, and she had them for so long, then it goes to Adrian. But enough about all that legal crap. I bet you came to talk about some of the more often talked about parts of this episode, which is, I remember when this episode first aired, again, I didn't watch it back then, and unfortunately I did hear some spoilers. The main thing people were talking about is the fact that the akuma was in the rings, which meant Ladybug had to break them. And we all know what else is in those rings. It's the feather, by the way. It's the feather that controls Adrian. So that's one of the things I had spoiled, because I saw a lot of people talking about the fact that she broke the rings and why didn't the feather come out? But side note, I did love noticing her hesitation before she broke them. And not just that, during the whole catching the akuma sequence, which is often reused animation, she did look visibly kind of upset when she said gotcha. Like, she was worried. She was not 100% sure how it works and whether he would be okay. And you can see her relief when the trophy thing disappears and he's there and he's fine. But a lot of people were saying, well, why is he still there? Why didn't the feather come out when she broke the rings? And, you know, these are not my theories, but I'm going to give... I think there's two main interpretations I've seen people use to explain that. One, some people said, well, it depends how long the thing has been in there, as in, like, the butterfly was more recently put in, it comes out first, and because the feather has been in there so long, it takes longer to come out. Okay, that could work. Maybe, yeah, it didn't come out right away. If she'd left them broken, it would have come out later, but because then she fixed them with, you know, Miraculous Ladybug, then it stays in there. The other interpretation I've seen people say is that it's about intention. She only wanted to release the akuma. She did not want to release a feather, and maybe that works. Especially because in that moment, she was also holding the rings. They were in her hand, and as we know, the person who holds the object controls the center monster. So she did not want him to disappear from existence, so the rings, still having that control, you know, carried out that intention of not disappearing him. But that's about all I can say about breaking the rings. I do want to get back to the grandparents, because let me tell you, you can tell a character is written well if I hate them and I want to punch them. Look, I know some families are really traditional and follow the whole stay-at-home mum working dad thing, but this family was over-the-top patriarchal to the point where the husband was constantly shutting down his wife. Like, I don't blame her for getting akumatized. She was very justified here. She was actually the first one to suggest, hey, how about we ask Adrian what he wants? And in the end, she was the one who handed the rings back to him. But he kept shutting her down, and there was even a line where he straight up said, just suffer in silence as you're used to doing so well. And I was like, what? Okay, so you're straight up admitting that you make your wife suffer and you just want her to stay silent. Like, I know I'm kind of stating the obvious here, and like, yes, we can gather that if we watched it, but yeah. Speaking of which, there was one interesting moment. I will make sure to bring this up, because back in Illustrator, I made sure to mention the few moments where I laughed, like, out loud, because it's my way of showing that, hey, the show did a good job at some points. And I did get one laugh in this episode, which was just the way, when something was burning and the and what's his name, Johnny, Gabriel's father, ran off into the kitchen. I just loved when his wife was just like, "Oh, that's Johnny, always playing with fire," and I'm like, "What?" So that line just came out of nowhere, and it was the one part of this episode that was funny. Like, and I know, like, I'm not saying the show always needs to be funny when I say there was just one moment that was. I'm admitting, yeah, sometimes this show needs these serious moments, but I loved that they managed to slip in a little humor there. It works so well. I don't know if they were trying for humor with the way Marinette acted, that when she pretended to be a waitress and with the accent and everything. If that was meant to be humor, it didn't really land, I guess. Um, but it was all right. Like, you can tell she was trying to be supportive. Um, it's a little half and half on like whether she even needed to be there or whether she should have stayed out of it. It's a tricky question of whether someone should stay out of something and let it be a family matter, or whether they should get involved a little bit because otherwise people won't make the right choices. I don't know. But then who decides what's the right choice, you know? Because if Marinette hadn't been posing as a waitress and she'd been able to speak freely the whole time, she probably would have said right from the start, "Hey, why don't we think about what Adrian wants?" But she had to try to be subtle about it. And Nathalie couldn't even be in the room for lunch, but she heard everything because apparently that door is very, very thin. Because she was right outside that door, and there were moments where we could see her reaction to some of the things they were saying. Speaking of Nathalie, like, even though she wasn't as heavily involved in this episode as I expected her to be, there were some interesting moments. Like, the way, I don't know if it was a bit too much exaggerated, but the way that she reacted, like the expression and everything when she got the phone call, and at first we didn't know what it was about, but we could see from her reaction that it was not going to be good when she recognized who was calling. Um, but speaking of the phone call, a lot of people might not pick up on this, but I noticed a very subtle detail, which is that she answered the phone and spoke to, presumably, Grandpa Lord Graham, holding the phone to her left ear, which a lot of people don't realize it actually means something. Because people more often hold their phone to their right ear, but when they use their left, it usually means that it's they're trying to distance themselves emotionally, or like they have no emotional connection to who they're talking to. It's a very subtle thing, but some people do it unconsciously. And it's a nice detail to notice. I don't know if it's intentional or if an animator just picked a random side. I don't know. It's sort of like when I notice a character using their left hand for something, and I'm like, is that intentional? Is that character canonically left-handed? Or did an animator just like not think about it and pick a random side? I don't know. But if it's intentional, great, because it could mean something. Speaking of details, I was watching this, and when we got to the transformation sequence, which, by the way, the transformation moment was another. It was a nice little reminder. I almost forgot for a moment that Nathalie knows she's Ladybug, and it's like, oh, how could you forget that? We had the whole London special and everything, and season 5 finale, but for the last few episodes, you know, it wasn't relevant. I almost forgot until it was subtle. Marinette was like, hey, you take, what's her name? You take care of her and I'll go get help. And obviously that's code for, hey, get grandma out of the room. I'm going to transform and be Ladybug. Obviously Nathalie knows that. But what I was going to say about the transformation sequence. First thought I had when it came on is I was like, this feels new. Did they not do a transformation in the previous two episodes that I watched in Illustrator and Sublimation? Maybe they did and I just didn't remember or take it in or whatever. Maybe I'm going crazy and they did. But it was during this transformation sequence that things felt new and I actually had a chance to really process it in season 6 style, which I'm gonna say, I know a lot of people hate on the new animation and I'm pretty fine with it. I'll probably do a separate video about like season 6 changes, the animation, the design changes and all that. But I will say the transformation sequence in particular, I thought it looked really good. Like the details, like the animation in the way the earrings changed, and also the nice animation in the way her hair changed, because in this episode it was up in a bun, and they did take the effort to animate the way it had to change in the transformation, which normally it doesn't have to change because she's one of the few Miraculous holders who don't change their hair. But yeah, it was really cool to see. And speaking of details, I did notice, completely by accident, there was this one moment where I paused it just to write down a little note about something else. And the moment that I paused it on was a really close-up shot, and I just thought, that is really detailed. I don't know if the picture quality will be not as good in my screenshot or anything, but you can see it on screen now. I'll put it on. This is the frame that I'm thinking of. It's just another example of, hey, it's really detailed and I think it looks really good. Speaking of which, it was really subtle, but with one of the lucky charms, because again, she can do multiple lucky charms now, but one of the lucky charms was a scarf, and I remember pausing in one moment where she was wearing it as a scarf, and I thought, she looks like she's trying to be a ninja. Just in that split second, like, the difference a scarf can make, it made me think ninja, and that was really cool. But at this point, I'm just rambling on about little details. I think I got all my main thoughts out. This episode is definitely a highlight of season 6. I mean, I say that, I've only seen 2 other episodes of season 6 so far, but if I had to rank them, I feel like in terms of like quality and everything, I might even put this one above Illustrator and Sublimation. It didn't have as many like negative moments, because I remember I did have some complaints about each of those two. Particularly, I think Illustrator was the one that I mentioned more negatives for. I'm already forgetting my own reviews. But point is, in terms of quality and writing and everything, this one did pretty good. But with that being said, let's move on. I believe the next episode I'll be reviewing will be Daddy Cop. I hate that name. Ew. But yeah, Daddy Cop, which, again, it's out of order and I've gone over this in a previous video, because officially Werepapas is number 5 and Daddy Cop is number 4, but I'm watching them in the same order they released, because it's the order everyone else had to watch them, so I did this one first, and next up is Daddy Cop. So, that being said, I'll see you next time for Daddy Cop, more Miraculous, and other things as well. See you next time, guys.